On the same day Democrats announced specific articles of impeachment against Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi also held a press conference saying that she and other congressional Democrats have struck a deal with Donald Trump on his trademark NAFTA renegotiation, which he has relabeled the USMCA. Again, this has to do with trade. It's not much different from NAFTA, but I will give you some of those details. So the concessions that the Trump administration gave to Democrats included removing a provision that Democrats criticized as a boon to the pharmaceutical industry. Democrats had objected to provisions governing intellectual property, and that intellectual property would mean protections for new pharmaceutical products, in particular an advanced class of drugs called biologics, which were given 10 years of protection from cheaper alternatives. So that was one of the things that Democrats fought on when it came to the USMCA, and the Trump administration agreed or conceded to Democrats. But let me just note one thing, and this is very important. This isn't legislation yet, right? So we're not talking about specific detailed legislation that they're negotiating. This is a handshake deal that congressional leadership, congressional Democratic leadership made with Donald Trump. So who knows what the final legislation is gonna look like? But I have a huge problem with the timing of this, and I also do not think that this negotiation, this deal, this new trade deal is gonna be much different from NAFTA. But with that said, Nancy Pelosi during her press conference was asked about the timing, and here's what she had to say.
Is it a coincidence that you are announcing this bipartisan deal on the same day that you're unveiling your articles of impeachment?
No, it's not a coincidence. It's just as we get to the end of a session, there have to be some decisions made. The timetable for impeachment is the timetable of the committees, and that came to an end with the hearing yesterday. But for us, this has been, we didn't know what day it would be, but the trade representative, Ambassador Lighthizer, who was quite remarkable to work with. He shared our values. He understood why we could not accept the Trump administration product. And he wanted to get this signed by the Mexicans and the Canadians. When you're dealing with something like this, it could be perishable. So he wanted to close while we were all in agreement, and therefore we came to agreement as we go forward.
So he wanted to close because that's gonna help him out in his re-election campaign. So on the same day that we announced articles of impeachment, including abuse of power and obstruction of justice, we're gonna also hold a press conference giving Donald Trump a giant win, which will then give him some content for his political attack ads against whoever he ends up running against, right? And let me just note, it is a huge political win for Trump because the AFL-CIO, labor union, has backed this. They're in favor of this. And so you think the Republicans are gonna give you credit, Nancy Pelosi? You think they're gonna look out for you and give you a giant pat on the back during an election campaign? This is insane. I don't know what they're doing.
Well, I think I do. And so once again, it's moderate, so-called moderate Democrats in districts where they think that they're in potential danger, saying if I appease Republicans, I'll be able to win my elections. That theory has never worked. I just asked Claire McCaskill, Joe Donnelly, Blanche Lincoln. I can go on and on for days listing Democrats who thought they could appease Republicans. In fact, they just backed their talking points. And they put pressure on Pelosi. That's why she's right actually in saying it's not a coincidence. They put a lot of pressure on her to get this passed and give Trump that victory, which they could then trumpet as like, oh, I was bipartisan with Trump in their districts. Terrible political strategy, but they believe it's a winning strategy before the year ends. Now, in terms of the concessions that the Democrats got, they did get some concessions. The one that Anna mentioned, there's also one on cars. It's a relatively mid-sized concession.
Tiny.
Yeah.
Let me give you the details on that.
Okay.
So Trump's USMCA has made other changes generally sought by Democrats, like raising the threshold for the proportion of a car's value that must be made in North America in order to qualify for the PAC's zero tariffs. It also contains provisions designed to strengthen Mexican labor unions and roll back a special system of arbitration for corporations long opposed by Democrats. So look, there are some concessions there, but don't get too excited about those concessions, because again, this is not finalized legislation. There's no legislation written at all yet, okay? This was a handshake deal with Donald Trump. So in the final version of this legislation, once it's written, if you think Democrats are gonna fight for these concessions? You think they're gonna hold Donald Trump accountable?
Well, look,
Come on.
I know, but this one's more complicated because this version has to go to Mexico and Canada. So it would be harder to roll it back. So yes, it's Trump, so you never know. He could be like, hey, thanks knuckleheads for giving me a victory on the day that you announced my impeachment. Later, I'm not gonna abide by the concessions that my guy gave you because I was just kidding. But in this case, it really would be harder. And in some of the negotiations, in fact, most of the negotiations the Democratic leadership do with the Republicans, they come out completely empty-handed, included in a different story today. Well, on drug prices, I mean, they got nothing. On the defense spending, they got nothing. In this case, they actually did get a couple of concessions, including the one on the special system of arbitration that the corporations wanted. I think that's an important one. And so also keep in mind, AFL-CIO is very important and powerful in the Democratic Party because they also give money to Democratic politicians. So when you combine the conservative Democrats with the labor unions who have money, and the ideology that and they got some concessions, with the ideology Democrats have overall of like making bipartisan agreements is the most important thing we could do, this was near inevitable. I'm not saying that it was the right thing at all, okay? But I'm surprised they got even this level of concessions.
So look, we've taken some political bets in the past. I feel bad at how many times you've lost money against me. So I won't try to goad you into another bet right now. But
that's exactly what she's doing.
I can't wait to see what this legislation looks like because I can't wait to tell you, I told you so. Look, here's what's really happening, okay? This is not even about Democrats running in purple districts and they're so scared, am I gonna get reelected? It's not even about them. This is about corporate Dems looking out for the business interests of businesses in America, right? They're looking out for their donors, they don't wanna lose their donors. So that's the reason why they're willing to make these types of deals with Donald Trump. Again, I could be wrong, this is my speculation. I don't think that the final deal is gonna be robust. I don't think it's really gonna be something that progressives are gonna be too happy with. But nonetheless, like the political timing of this is disastrous. I don't know why Democrats would hand Donald Trump something to use against them in the 2020 election.
Yeah, well, look, on that I actually do disagree. I want to be clear on what we're disagreeing on. I'm not saying that this is a good deal. We're not disagreeing on that. I'll come back to that in 1 second. But what I think that since it's going to Mexico and Canada, it will be much harder to reverse the concessions, okay? So that's the one thing we're slightly disagreeing on. And then, and we're definitely not disagreeing on corporate donors having a big impact. In fact, the New York Times reports that the Democrats, not the Republicans, Democrats wanted to, quote, provide more certainty to the businesses in their districts that depend on the pact.
Ding, 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 ding,
okay,
ding.
meaning
Yes.
corporate interests,
Yes.
okay? And so, but I also disagree that handing Trump a political victory is always a bad thing. So what do I mean by that? Look, if you think a deal is good, and I don't think that this deal is good, but if you thought a deal was good, should you do it even though Trump would get to brag about it? Yes, you should do it anyway. Like criminal justice reform, that was a relatively good deal. The Republicans came in our direction instead of us going to them. I'd take a victory even if Trump gets to brag about it. You see what I'm saying? You gotta do what's right based on principles and policies. So now in this case, last thing as to why this is not a good idea overall. So a lot of the progressive economists and overall economists said it's still pretty much NAFTA. Even Paul Krugman, who often agrees with Nancy Pelosi, was like, I don't know why the Democrats would make this deal. It's still NAFTA. So it's with tweaks. And so, but the cherry on top for the Republicans is they then turn around and get Democratic leadership arguing for their pact.
Right.
So now Pelosi said it's a victory for America's workers because she signed on to it. No, and Richard Neal, head of the House Ways and Means Committee that you saw there, he said this is a transformative agreement.
I can't. It's just, it's so frustrating.
So
it's so embarrassing to be a Democrat.
So this is what Anna's right about. Even if you agree to the deal, you could come out there and go, hey, listen guys, we got important concessions, and the unions agree, labor agrees, we had to do it. Is it a great deal? No, I wish it was a much better deal. Here's all the things we wanted, we didn't get. But we had to do it if you really believe that on these grounds, right? But when you go and then gush about the deal, oh my God, Donald Trump's deal is a victory for American workers. No, now you're unnecessarily handing him a political gift that you didn't need to hand him, even if you made the deal. So that's why the Democrats are so frustrating. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.